Hello, we are here to talk about accounts payable within Business Central. The first thing we're going to discuss is just vendors. Here is my list of vendors. As you can see, you can have vendors that have a numeric number. If I sort the other direction here, I have a vendor that is alpha numbers, and then a mixture of alphanumeric, and technically you could do numeric alpha also. If I wanted to, I could also change the number of a vendor. It will ask me, as long as I have permission to do so, it'll ask me what I would like for the number to be and update that information. So if Allied Universal ends up being bought out or changes their name, then I could change the code if I wanted to. So as I'm in here on my list, once again, remember through personalization that I can add or remove some of the columns if I don't want them anymore. So if I no longer want language code, I can hide that. If I bring forward the field, I can see additional fields that are available. And I could bring more fields forward if I wish to, also through customizing the profile. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And I can also move my columns around if I didn't want those columns there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to resort this. And I can also use my search to search for a particular vendor if I wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Fabricon. And it opens up to my individual vendor record. So I have my number up here. And as I stated, I could change my number if I wanted to. It would ask me if I wish to make that change. And do I want to continue? So I'm going to go ahead and say no. You could also set it as an approval needs to be done in order for the number to take effect. I have my name field. I have options for if it's blocked. So blocked means no posting takes place against the vendor. Blocked for payment means I can still bring in purchase orders and post against those. I could do purchase invoices, but I no longer can make a payment. Maybe you're in dispute with them for something. Then I also have balance due and a balance column or fields here. So these ones show what is currently due or overdue and then what is due. But in this particular case, they're both the same. And everything in a red shows that it is overdue. So it just shows me all my open transactions. If I select more, then I have some additional fields, once again, through my personalization that I'm choosing to see. Once again, if I select personalize, then I have the ability to, for this particular one, I only see it when I show more. So it has where I can do it as a show always, and then it'll always be there. And then if I open up here, it'll show only under show more. The show one collapsed. I'll go ahead and select that. And then if I say show less, and then I collapse that down, it'll actually be a field that'll come at the top here. So you can always have it available to be seen. So I'm going to go ahead and select that I'm done with that. And now it's always showing there. So if I open up my address and contact, it has my address fields, phone number, mobile phone number, email, my home page. Our account number is your account number with that vendor. So if you didn't want to look it up, you didn't have to. Then I also have a primary contact down here. You can have additional contacts for who you might send the ACH to, also who you might send the purchase order to. That'll be up. I'll show you that in just a moment. But you also can have an unlimited number of contacts associated with the vendor. If I come down here for my invoicing, I can associate taxing information to it. So if I wanted to track use tax with the vendor, I could. A vendor number here is if I needed an additional pay to. So you might have who you buy the product from, but also who you pay the product for. Then I have options for discounting. My posting groups here is where I'm going to tell the system where am I associating my purchasing accounts to. And the vendor posting group is if I want to categorize my vendors and associate an AP account with. Mine are based on if the product or the vendor, are domestic or if they're a foreign vendor or not. But if I come over here and I select from the list, this will show me what accounts payable account I can post to. So in this case, they're all the same. But I might here on my code technically have it if it's miscellaneous vendor or a trade vendor or an employee. Different ways in which I might want to run a report or know that information by my vendor without actually having to create additional posting groups themselves. Under the payment option down here, I have payment terms code, and these are ones that you can make up yourself. The system comes with some, but it's also shared with the accounts receivable side. So you might see payment terms in here that you're not used to seeing, but that's just because accounts receivable might have made them. Payment method codes. These are ways in which you can tell the system, am I normally going to pay this vendor with a check, or do I normally pay them with an ACH? You might also have one related to PayPal. You could have one in here related to a charge card. And so this is just ways in which you can filter the information when you're running your checks or your ACH and be able to pay them. Priority code is associated the base product to when you're creating the payments. Who do you prioritize to pay? All the ones first, then all the twos, and then all the threes. So technically, you don't have to have a priority code in the system, and you can actually use it for other information. Then preferred business bank account code is if you're doing an electronic payment with them, you have to at least set up one bank, and you have to tag it that it's going to be used for electronic payment. And then the rest here are just ones that you can fill in some basic information if they're a company or a person. Store the federal ID. You'll notice there's some 1099 information here, so you can process 1099s. And then if I come down to receiving, I can also default what location might I receive in. If I was receiving in goods and I had multiple locations, where might I be receiving that? What's the typical shipping method that I am going to receive that in, and how do I normally receive it, and a lead time calculation. If I'm not dealing with inventory, then I really don't need to fill this information in. So then if I come over here, I'm going to select my little information at the top there, details. Just this allows me to see information related to the vendor. So the vendor card, what's the balance? If they're actually tied to a customer, what is the balance for the customer also? All outstanding invoices, what's the total, my overdue amount? I can also bring forward fields related to purchase orders if I wanted to. I have them hidden at the moment through my personalization. Then if I come down here, I have some tiles of information. So I can select a posted purchase invoice box here, and it's actually going to come in and show me my purchases that I have done in the past with them, my dollar amounts, what were the posting dates, what's the vendor invoice number. I have the ability to do a search here, so if I wanted to search and find that information, I could. If they had been canceled or corrected, so creating a credit memo, that would also show that information over here, and I also see the ones with any amount remaining. Back over here, if I select my attachments column, then you'll see that I have the ability under documents. I can have multiple different types of attachments. I have a PDF, CSV, a JPEG. I could easily add an Excel file, a Word file. I can also flow it down to the purchase transaction, and then it would save it and attach it to the posted transaction. I can also have a link here, so I could have a website. I could have more than one if I wanted to be storing that information. And then I can add notes. And if I go ahead and select into the note, I can just enter a note. And then it'll store that. And then it also has the date and the time in which the note took place. So if I wanted to come in here and edit, I see that information there. So a couple fields at the top here that we'll talk about are under the home thing. You can add, as I mentioned, contacts. So you can view all that are associated with the vendor. If you needed to, you could merge a vendor with another vendor. So this will allow two records to be merged into one. When you're creating vendors, you can have the system set up templates, and then it'll apply the template when you create the vendor. So you might ahead of time assign payment terms, payment method code, 1099 information, the posting group, the state, any of that information you can go ahead and assign to it. You can also select this to send an email. So if I open this up, it would default in and bring in the email that's associated under the communication tab. I can add an email. I can also create Word templates where it'll drop in additional information here and a subject. And I'm going to go ahead and just discard that. I can also pay the vendor from here. There's multiple places in which I can select to pay the vendor, but I could select entries here, and create a payment, and it would do it whether it's, I'm going to tell it if I want it to be done as a check or an ACH. Request approval, we mentioned that if I wanted to, when I add a vendor, change information on a vendor, that I can request it to be done as an approver. From here, I could create a new invoice, purchase order, credit memo for the vendor. The vendor ledger entries is where I see all the entries that have ever taken place against the vendor, whether I have an amount or no amount on the line here. And then I can select the entry and find entries, and I can find everything associated to it. If it's an actual invoice, then I can go ahead and select show document, and it would show me the information associated to that document. Dimensions, I can pre-assign dimensions to the system here, tell if it's default in one or if it has to have code mandatory. Statistical information, this is just related to, once again, just looking at the information. Based on my work date assigned in the system, I can adjust the information that I'm seeing here. So if you want to be able to see it all in one spot, this is a great place under vendor statistics. I can also have the attachments. So the attachments I have here, if anything has been approved, I can add comments. Document layouts allow me to, as I mentioned, assign an email address if I want to do vendor remittance. If I come down here, I can put in for purchase order. If I do vendor remittance after the fact, or return shipment. So I can associate a report, and then I could add email address information here and attachments and what the body of the email is going to look like. This one will show me all the emails that have been sent to the vendor. I can associate, this is where I would associate the bank accounts with them. And then if I was dealing with inventory, I would have an item reference here. So there's many options that are very similar to the drop down here that are available under actions. Under my related here, they also have many of the same options. One of them is vendor remittance addresses. So I might have buy from vendor, a sell to vendor, but they might have a third address as to where the check is to be remitted to. I can add that information here. Under purchases, the one that I want to mention is this recurring purchase lines. If I select that, I can have a code, and I'm going to show you how that is set up here in a second. And then I can have it automatically, when I create a document, bring in those as lines. So if I select card up here, then I have paper, and it's to buy printing paper. I have 2 GL accounts. I could change my description if I wanted to. Here I did. I added printing paper. Quantities of 1. I could put an amount in if I wanted to. I can leave it blank. I have 2 here because I want them to go to these particular marketing and admin department codes. So I've split it out to 2 lines. So we'll talk about that one in just a moment. One more thing under the related and purchases, there's also prepayment percentages. So if you needed to prepay a vendor before they actually will ship you something, then you can set up prepayments. It does work under the purchase orders. And then if I go to reports, there's some reports that are available here. A vendor balance to date is a very good option on the reporting side. And then under the report option here, they have a few also. And then, of course, under regular Business Central, there are the aged accounts payable and so forth. So I'm going to back out of here. And actually, I'll just go ahead and show you that. If I come up here to all reports and we select under payables, and then I have reports here. So those are the basic reports under just the accounts payable area. And as I mentioned, you do have the aged accounts payable. There are other ones related under purchasing. Come down here and purchasing, and then some reports. Some of these are vendor related, but anything under purchasing assumes you're dealing with vendors and items. So back under just my vendor list here, I'm going to go ahead and select under purchasing, and I'm going to select purchase invoices. I am going to create a new one. I can either type in the vendor number, I can type in the vendor name, I could technically type in anything related to any of the other columns here. So if it was a contact name was all I had, or a phone number, I could type that in. I'm going to do Fabricon, which is vendor number 10,000, or as I stated, based on the name. Then I also have where I could search and have typed in the vendor name or the vendor number, and then it defaults and I have these particular fields showing. So if I come back up here to the show more, you'll see that there are many more fields available, but once again, based on your personalization, it's depending on what you're going to see or not. So if I do show less, I'm going to talk about some of these fields here. Document date, that's the date that's on the vendor invoice itself. So let's just say it's as of the 1st. And then the date that I receive it, I'm going to just put in T for today. I received it today. So the due date is the 31st because most of my payment terms are current month. I can then enter in a purchase invoice number. What date do I want it posted? As of today. So if I come down here, it did drop in the 2 lines. So I could come over here and I could put in $120, come down here, and let's say this one was $150 for admin. I can also, if I wanted to, I could add another line, have a copy from above, and do 1, and we'll do 300, and IT bought a bunch of paper this time. All right, so I'll just fill in my additional dimensional information there. So it gives me a total of 570. So from here, I technically have a couple different options at the top here. I could post it. I could review the posting. If I wanted to, I can wait to do it in a batch. All right. I could post and select new, which would post the document and then just create a new one for me to enter the next vendor in. Under prepare, I can also, if I didn't have it automatically bring in the recurring lines, then it would bring in that information for me. I could attach a document to it if I wanted to. Under request approval, I could send it out for approval. So the approvals is where I can ask for it by, maybe who I'm buying the product from, or it could be based on the GL, it could be based on the dollar amount, it could be based on dimensions. Many things will make a difference on whether it needs to be sent for approval or not. And under my invoicing, I can add dimensional information to it. I have statistical information here, so it'll give me the total of the amount, my line amount. If I was dealing with tax, I would see that information also. I can associate comments. Once again, another area to do attachments. And then under more options, these are just the ability to look at different areas. And if I wanted to do my e-document, if I was doing Power Automate for a workflow, then I would see that information here. I can also come over here for my informational tab. I'm going to see the detail will be the same as what I was seeing under the vendor card. I can associate an incoming document. So if I attach a file here, and I can just drop something in there, and it's going to associate with it. I can drop in more than one document if I wanted to, and the same under my notes here, or a different attachment. There's multiple ways to get an attachment on the document. They all will post through in the system. If I back out here, I will then see my document down here, and I have my amount column over here. I can click on that, and I can drill into it to see what makes up the line information. From here, I can also select to show the document. So I can send it out if I needed to for approval. Open, I can change my status to released, and that might mean something that if I came in here to post and post batch, I could state that I want the status to be everything that's been released. So that way I know they're kind of finished. Whoever's putting them in says they're good and they're done. All right. So a couple other things related to this before we head off from our purchasing here. And I'm going to go ahead and just take out these 2 lines. And I just wanted to take a moment and talk about deferral code. So I have my dollar amount in here for $120, and I could defer this expense if I wanted to. Now, maybe office supplies is not one that you would be doing, but just for example, it could be a different type of expense. So I just want to talk about it for a moment. I'm going to give it a deferral code. I'm going to put in a description. So 12-month expense, you can pick whatever defer GL account that you want. How much am I deferring? 100%. What's my calculation? Could be straight line, equals per period, days per period, user defined. So I might do it related to the period if I was doing accounting periods that were not the typical, like if it was a 4-week, 5-week. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do straight line. Do I want it to do it at the start the posting date, beginning of the period that my invoice is going to post in, the end of the period, the beginning of the next, or the next calendar. All right, so I'm going to leave it at the beginning of the period, due 12, and I have it. My description is 12-month expense. So I come in here, let me pick this one again. Now, I also, where it had it be user defined, I can come over here and I can see what my deferral schedule is going to be. So if I open this up, this is where it has my 10-10-10 starts on the first of the month because I stated to start at the beginning of the period. If I needed to, and I changed this to 6 months, then I would just tell it to calculate it, and it would recalculate it for me and post based on what I have here instead of based on what I have in that particular code. So you do have the ability to change it. I could change my starting date, and as long as I calculate it and I have equal on my amount, then the system will be fine with it. I could also come in here and manually update the values if I chose to. So now if I come over here and I'm going to select preview posting, this shows that it's going to have 28 entries to the GL. I will go ahead and select it. And then there are my transactions. So I'm going to select my posting date. And I'm really just going to look at the one on the 3rd here first. All right. So I have my 2 lines going into my expense here. So one of them is posting to the expense account and one's being pulled out of the expense account. And it's being moved over to my deferral account. And then I also have my AP account because I do owe the vendor the $120. Then the system takes those amounts for the $10 and puts it at the beginning of the time frame throughout the rest of the year. It also has in the system where I can do my allowable posting ranges will be based on what posts to the GL, and then it has a separate one for what posts for deferral. So that way, if you do end up posting to the future, you're not going to allow you to just post regular journal entries to the future. So once again, if I'm good with this, then I can go ahead and just post it. And I could post it in the batch or post it individually. My system has it where it's set to ask me, do I want to open up the posted invoice? So I'm going to go ahead and select yes. So if I'm in here in the posted invoice, I can see my information here. All right. I also see my attachment that I could open up if I wanted to. If I select find entries, then I'm going to see all my GL ledger entries. I'm going to have the ability to see my incoming document. I can see the posted document, all the GL ledger entries that I'll be posting, and then my vendor ledger, and then the vendor detail ledger entry. Now you'll notice it's only 4 entries because it's related to the posting date. So the entries are all there. Back up here, go back to the main screen. I will search for GL register. And then that has that information related to the purchasing. It's going to be related to the deferral information that posted. Now, you can very easily, if you wanted to, if I come back over here to posting and I go to posted purchase invoices, so there it brings up the last one that was done. And it says, shows my amount that's still open. It hasn't been canceled or corrected, which I would not expect it to. If I bring open my information pane, then I have my details of information and I can see the attachments. And I also see all the related GL ledger entries. So I have all the information here. And once again, I can open it if I wanted to. I have options if I needed to correct it or cancel it. So these are ones that I'll just do a reversal of the posted invoice. A credit memo will be created. It will match with the invoice and cancel it. All right. I also can do a cancel here. We'll create and post a purchase credit memo that reverses the posted purchase invoice, and it'll be marked as cancel. Or just go ahead and create a credit memo. Maybe I just want to change a little bit of it, not all the lines, then I could do that also. So you have many options when you're going in and creating a credit memo itself. And then, as I mentioned, the aged accounts payable report. If I come down here, I have the ability to pick when I'm aging it as of. So if I pick T for today, my method, the accounting period length, then I can also do If it's only overdue by, so I don't get anything that's necessarily current, do I want to print the detail, use the document number, or also print it to Excel? Then I have the options for printing this information out. I can print it, preview it under my send, push it to a PDF, put it to Excel or Word. A schedule will allow me to schedule it and run it at a later point. So it might be a very large report and I don't want it to consume my time. So I'm going to go ahead and just ask it to do a schedule. All right, so that pretty much covers the basics of accounts payable. We didn't discuss necessarily paying the invoice itself. We'll do that in a separate video. Thank you.